If I could jump in, the reason why I took the trajectory that I took, in my previous remarks, bringing up Moldbug, which seems ridiculous because he doesn't deserve to be kind of ranked with these other thinkers, I think he does this by accident, not on purpose. But what he does is, I think, identify a contradiction within the dialectical structure of liberalism that we can then affirm, and then I think like a post-neo-reactionary view can ultimately is my argument for why history has not ended in the way that Logo describes. It's okay, we have this jurisprudential paradigm.
I kind of want to push against you a little on this one because let
me explain myself.
I know where you're going.
No, hold on. Let Joe explain. You think you don't know, so let Joe explain. Right. Then you're gonna go for it.
Let me explain. So if you want to look at the jurisprudential paradigm itself historically, you go back to the pre-modern period. You have if you're living in the 11th century, for example, the idea that the state would have some kind of legal system that would regulate all disputes in society wasn't an idea that was really that we had. I mean, ultimately, the church was fundamentally responsible for the majority of legal practice, and a lot of the initial innovations in the creation of things like human rights and a lot of the legal paradigms that we have came out of the church itself. But then you have this kind of war, this kind of European civil war of sorts, institutionally that kind of occurs between the papacy and the northern aristocracies. And so one of the functions that is necessary for the northern aristocracies to perform, to take authority away from the papacy and liberate themselves from papal control, is to establish their own legal systems. And so this is particularly played out in Britain. Obviously, Britain has a very rich legal tradition. What the British do ultimately is create a kind of secularized legal system that is then responsible to the king rather than to the papacy. And this is essentially the basis of technocracy in a certain sense, because what they do is say, okay, well, if you look at like Francis Bacon, for example, the dude was the Attorney General of the UK, and he explicitly says, okay, what empiricism is essentially is me taking legal principles of inquiring into jurisprudence and then projecting them onto epistemology. And you have like the Royal College and all these different institutions subject to the king, where all the scientific disciplines are established. Ultimately, this is the basis for where liberal political theory is established as a secular discipline.
And like you said
itself.
with Kant, with like the way he even describes the human itself through the faculties of the understanding, it's very legalistic. It's very almost like instrumental reason. It's got like this almost corporate structure where the content of the is get fed into the understanding of the categories, and it's very legalistic. And
but this idea of putting the state at the center of our jurisprudential paradigm is something that gets derived out of this war between the northern aristocracies and the papacy, because God was supposed to be you still swear on the Bible today in most legal systems when you have to give an affidavit or something, or bear witness in a court for this reason, because the courts are supposed to be fundamentally theological, at least historically, but this has been secularized to usurp authority to the state.
And the lowering of since the Protestant Reformation, and
ultimately to the technocracy. And so what we live in, right, you say, okay, well, we have this universalist jurisprudential paradigm. Everyone is recognized, their rights are all recognized in universality. But there is ultimately a new master-slave dialectic that has emerged, which is ultimately there's the technocracy and then there's everybody else. And we're actually being subjugated by this bureaucratic technocracy that has usurped the control that the church previously had as a dogmatic institution running the West. But then they sell it to you as, oh, this is science, this is rationality, this is we're actually we're just doing epistemology here. We're not dogmatic theologians.
Even that's over, Joel. We're going through the same paradigm shift all over again. We're leaving academia, we're leaving politics, we're leaving mass media, we're leaving all the industry precisely for that reason. We're doing exactly the same things we did in the 70s. Right now with digital, we're gonna have a new class society, more brutal than ever, and it's gonna have 3 different autocracies that rule it. And here's the interesting thing: they're gonna be voyeuristic and step aside, because they're so sick and tired of being exposed all the time, because we live in the era of hyper-narcissism and everybody has a camera and a microphone. Meaning for the first time ever, power will disappear from you. I think that's fundamental to what's going on right now.
Well, I don't know.
You call it the decorationist society. That's
decorationism is the end of the old paradigm. When we go, you stand in Versailles and you obsessed with tonality and etiquette, and it's called the woke culture and shit like that these days. And none of that is even important any longer. It's just completely symbolic.
Well, we were
So
talking.
it's very similar to the society.
We're talking about a sensocracy coming. We're talking about a global police state, whether we like it or not. It's going to happen. It's everywhere now. And then the question is philosophically, what I'm working with is the response to the Chinese dream of Xi Jinping and a dictator is that, I'm not going to be moral about this, but actually a dictatorship doesn't last very long and it's not a very good way to keep creativity going within a system. It turns out that systems actually that are more plural seem to work better. Now, how can we figure that out? We need power.
I don't buy that.
We need to split power. Yes, we need to split power.
That's kind of sus.
Logo, what do you think?
No.
Yeah.
No,
okay.
wait. I think Joel
guys.
was going first, and then
my computer crashed for a sec, but I'm back. This kind of, I guess, if we're talking about tyranny and stuff too, we can kind of talk about NRX and
he didn't rage quit.
Yeah,
and you also had a response to Joel before that.
Yeah, no, this all ties together. So I know Curtis pretty well, and I think that he's not really saying anything new. He's really he's talking about a lot of. He's basically interested in Enlightenment absolutism, not even particularly older forms of monarchy, but particularly the Enlightenment absolutist monarch, which isn't even, that's pretty, it's a modern innovation. And you could say it's liberal on its own anyway.
Well, it's a liberalization of primordial monarchy that was present in Christendom and even before Christendom.
Absolutely. Yeah. So what it really is, so if you're saying it's a form of liberalism, you could say that absolutist monarchy is a sort of version of neoliberalism even. And what are the places that he points to, right? Where he's these are the people doing it well. It's like Singapore, right? It's a lot of these East Asian monarchies or
Oriental
Luxembourg.
strongman.
Yeah. And that's not really that doesn't really go against the end of history in any real way. It's just another form of bureaucracy, really. This is sort of this is what was Salazar in Portugal during the 20th century was essentially an enlightened monarch. He was an enlightened despot. And
but Salazar was based and he had authority from the Catholic Church. That was the difference. Sorry.
I like Salazar. I like Salazar, but he's fundamentally, or he's kind of like Yemen de Valera. He's like Yemen de Valera in Ireland at the same time, or FDR. We had a lot of these people that you could consider dictators.
God, you guys are bored with the United States of America as it is. You're so sick and bored.
No, but I think there is a temptation.
Anything else will go, right?
It's more. It's not. No, I think Moldbug's more. He's not really interested in America as it is. He's more interested in having a monarchy somewhere, just a place, just he wants a startup nation, an island society as that would be run like a startup, basically.
Okay. I'll give you an example, guys.
Wait, Joel, let Joel go, and then
let me respond to this quickly.
Okay.
So the reason why I bring up Moldbug is not just the idea of monarchy. Obviously, that's nothing new. Obviously, just reading all these old books about absolutist or just counter Enlightenment thinkers or whatever, that's nothing new. Obviously, what's new is him taking his cues from his libertarianism and saying,
that's what Popper did.
Yeah, Popper did. I was about to say that. You could say that he's already heading in that direction. But it doesn't really matter which name. I'm just using a name because to draw an example. We are trying to be, in the pursuit of trying to be the best liberals that we can, we end up getting jettisoned outside of liberalism. That's
neoliberalism, baby.
Well, I don't know if that you could really say that, because neoliberalism is, as far as I understand the concept, is ultimately just, a paradigm under which, basically we extend human rights to this kind of universalized, internationalist institutions and have a bunch of And I don't like Moldbug's positive. I like neocameralism is ridiculous, and I don't really like much of his positive philosophy. And I'm not trying to say Moldbug is the future or the answer. Just that there's an event that occurs.
No, I get what you're saying.
With neo-reaction, in which now, okay, there's something more to say. The problem now, how do we actually respond to? Because obviously the other aspect of Moldbug's thinking and ultimately neo-reactionary thinking is taking in all of the Italian elitists. And obviously this isn't new. The paleocons were aware of this stuff and so forth. But
the neoliberals.
Yeah, but the point that kind of derives out of this is, okay, well, we're living under a technocracy. and we're aware of this. 20th century became aware of this quite explicitly.
PMC classes, yeah.
How do we actually affirm, if affirming freedom and justice and so forth within liberalism ultimately just feeds the technocracy? How do we actually affirm any of these things authentically in a way that we can actually get some of them, as opposed to being told we're getting them, but getting the opposite, which is basically what
the question is, what is freedom? Like, this is like always bothered me. Like, everyone's like, well, like, what's like impinging on your freedom? What actually is impinging?
It's ultimately a negative concept. So if you tried to make it positive and say, well, actually, I care about something like creativity. I care about people
what's stopping you from being creative.
But freedom is also freedom.
No, it's not about stopping. It's about allowing. We have a society in which you're not allowed to take responsibility for things in so many cases because you have this giant bureaucracy that wants to regulate it. So, if I could give like an example, family member of mine was in the Air Force. He was a firefighter in the Air Force. And, they recently in Australia got all cucked and decided we need to have 50% of the armed services being female for some fucking reason.
Same in Canada with the,
it's insane, right?
Day of the rake. Day of the rake.
Obviously, they can't do many of these combat roles because they're women. And so they just kind of push them into all these like non-combat aspects of the Air Force, including firefighters. So he's been doing this for years. So, he was free from the purge, I guess. But all the people that are coming in are all women, right? And his sergeant was saying, oh, these people are they're nice girls or whatever, but they literally are failing all of the entry requirements. They can't actually perform the task and the training. They fail repetitively. If they were in the field and there was a fire or something, literally people would die because they'd be unable to do their job. The response of the higher ups was to get rid of the sergeant and replace them with a new sergeant until you get a sergeant which just goes along and says, okay.
You're basically saying like the technocracy isn't efficient enough is the problem. Like they're allowing these like inefficiencies in for symbolic reasons or something. What
I'm saying is that we can't delegate authority. We can't actually trust anyone to take responsibility for their particular domain of different domains of society and actually give people so-called freedom, but not freedom. Ultimately, give them responsibility. It's not rights. Everything is about rights.
That's the difference. No, but the responsibility framework and the duty framework is fundamentally different than the rights framework. Now, I think I'm like the only like LaBase trad Christian here, but I would say that the difference would be between like the conception of human rights that we have nowadays, that's a secularization of the Christian ethos, and what was duty and dignity and the more ancient values. That's obviously a point. But Joel, I think if I may interject, what you and Bard are both saying, I think you have commonalities here, because what you've described with, the gender equity and the thirst for representation is what Bard describes within the Decoration Society, where it's just the pseudo events and the signifiers. For example, the other day I saw this tweet by some histrionic journalist about, you don't care about voting because you're not voting about my fundamental human rights. It's like as if voting can grant you human rights, right? So it's again a symbol of the sort of thirst for identity and recognition from a very shallow, surface, one-dimensional aspect of this decorationist society that we live in, the technocracy. It's only sort of the surface level of granting you quote unquote rights and identity.
It's
but
bourgeois.
It's not really true. It's
actually
bourgeois,
reactionary.
Exactly. It's bourgeois liberalism. It's identity. A large body of identity politics is the PMC, professional managerial class, the managerial state.
Can I
giving you a pale representation of some sort of authenticity that we've lost when we went to the break into modernity, around the 19th century.
So a really useful term here, right? This is what Kajev calls the politics of equivalence. It's not like the politics of equality is that of aristocratic societies. All aristocrats are equal to each other, which is why they duel each other if they offend each other. But, they would never duel a slave because obviously it doesn't fucking matter what a slave thinks. You just kill slaves.
The homo sacer is another level of that. Yeah.
The bourgeois politics is one of equivalence. So what that is about like it's when people start talking about like equality of opportunity or saying like, what's fair in a taxation system. Like you have to do like a graduated tax or whatever. So it becomes like based off of like what is fair for your like what's the fair percentage of representation. This is like how the bourgeois thinks of equality. It's
the reign of quantity. Let's put it what it is. It's the reign of.
It's the term equivalence. So like what you would actually look like when you're saying like, okay, so they said in order to be equal, i.e. equivalent, we need to have the equivalent amount of women in like percentage as there are in the population represented in blah, 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 blah. This is all very reactionary bullshit. It doesn't actually mean anything, because what a future oriented or like one that was actually progressing towards the end of history as Kajev sees it would do was be not to even have like a differentiation between like the troops and just the workers. Like the worker, it's like more of like Junger's idea of the worker.
The working state, yeah.
Because like what do you like if everyone is involved in the economy, then everyone's represented in it. Like you don't like this idea that it's like, well, we need to have equivalent representation at all levels based on XYZ's demographics, blah, blah, blah. That's just a way of eliminating like the concern over like the larger differentiations in class.
That's not equality of opportunity. That's equality of outcome. That's where Rousseau comes into the picture. And that's what Rousseau is huge these days. Well, we don't have a Marxist left any longer. We have a Rousseauian left. We have a Rousseauian left, woke people out there. Mao, Hitler, Stalin, and Pol Pot all loved Rousseau, and that's why it's a dangerous time in that sense that the symbolic can now go violent very quickly.
Yeah, but none of those people have that much power.
Wait, Hitler wasn't based?
No. If it's a meritocracy, which
I also love Rousseau.
Okay, I hate Rousseau.
John, please. You're killing me here, buddy.
The meritocracy, what we're talking about, that was a bourgeois ideal, and Durden McCloskey and others have defended it. It makes sense. It's probably the best we can do. But the meritocracy is equality of opportunity. But if you start to say that we're going to have more women here rather than having more men here, whatever, and we forget about whatever requirements you have in general, we now talk about equality of opportunity law. We talk about equality of outcome because you're looking at all of this as privileges.
Yeah.
Institutions and privileges.
That's why it's
having a job
reactionary.
and getting paid. Yes, exactly. That's why having a job within these institutions today means
Leftists
getting the
are the
money.
real reactionaries.
No, that's true. That's
what Washington, D.C. is. That's what the European Union and Brussels are now. The institutions have been around for too long. There hasn't been war. There's been too much of peace. And these long periods of peace create these really corrupt institutions that don't even understand that they're all about privileges. There's really no difference between Washington, D.C. and our market in Nigeria, if you look at it. And the Nigerians at least are aware of the fact that they're corrupt, so they leave.
That is also the essence of neoliberalism.
If I may say something
as well,
here,
is that market logic.
One quick thing though. One quick thing I wanted to add. I am not as versed in philosophy as any of you guys. You guys are incredible, and everybody, please subscribe right now. Thank you guys so much for this amazing conversation. I just wanted to quickly mention the master-slave mentality that we were talking about before, which, as far as I understand, means that the slave becomes someone who would not really stake it all and fight to the death and would rather be subjugated. And that is my concern. Until they do. Well, yeah, I mean, this is my concern when it comes to the last man.
But the slave is just as important for that schema of recognition than as the master.
But now if we are in this state of the last man being predominant over our culture, like I don't know how long we're going to be able to exist until it all falls down and we have harder times and then we have to rebuild again. So I'm curious if anybody would like to also talk about this last man, bugman syndrome that's going on right now and how we can get out of that.
No
I feel
escape
energized, guys.
Everyone's that. Everyone's that. Everyone, especially the people who think most about it and talk most about it, right? Everyone is already this, like, we don't have a history. We are all like these floating people. We're floating fucking faces on an app made by Zoom right now. Like, this is who you really fucking are.
Wait, Logo,
like,
you're saying I can't have my base cottagecore reactionary
no, you can even you can Instagram about it, and you can turn it into a lifestyle brand. You can commoditize it. You can like you can sell T-shirts about your cottagecore. I can have a cookbook
about it.
Yeah, you can have a cookbook. Yeah, you can do everything. You can write cottagecore short stories and sell them on Amazon. You could do ASMR from your cottagecore and upload it to YouTube. Yeah, this is who we all are, and there's only the only real differentiation now in a global consumer society is between what Kajev calls the snobs and the animals, right? Because there's no real conflict left aside from the conflict between people who say that all things are consumable and people who say that they wouldn't ever deign eat such a thing.
Joel,
and that's what you know, people when they're like, oh, I'm not some bug man because I refuse to consume some things. Like it's like I do no FAP, right? Like this is not real. This is all bullshit. If that's how like you have to differentiate yourself, it's over.
Yeah, I
Logo
refuse
has
to
this
eat
particular
cum.
style of offending people on Twitter by doing, but he is right. But I think Logo offends people because people deep down know that Logo is right in this regard. But I don't know. We talked about this before, Logo. I think that
everyone likes their self mythology because it's part of they commoditize themselves.
But even the mythos itself becomes commodified in the sense that you're following sort of an aesthetic of rebellion. But I do agree that there's still
one that's salable.
No, but I do agree that there is spaces within the culture camp. But I know you think the culture camp isn't real, but
it's all bullshit.
It's all bullshit. But I think there's still, you know, I know that. Sorry, Joel, I cut Joel off. That's another conversation.
No, I appreciate how much of an asshole Logo is because you need to be an asshole to, you know, not be led down blind alleys and convince yourself of bullshit. But the question for me is, okay, there's got to be something that we can fight for. There's got to be something that we can actually do.
Yes.
What do you? Okay, exactly. Here we are. What is wrong?
Don't cut him off. Don't cut him off.
No, I'm saying, but what do you need? What is missing? Like, is this a personal problem? Or
Phallus.
You need to feel your dick. You can reach down right there. You got a shirt that says private.
No, I mean more than that. I mean in a metaphysical sense. So I'm working with messianic stories now. I'm working with saviors, Salchians, all those stories throughout history because that's all we got left.
But Alexander,
wanting for the phantom phallus is like what we have to do.
But you live in listen, guys. You live in the most effeminate period in human history.
So you gotta want the dick. I want the dick.
Democracy we live in.
we gotta learn how to strive for the phallus, is what you're saying. Because
some of you guys,
to Bard, the phallus is sort of like an archetype, a drive of civilization.
Very homoerotic.
No, but I think what Alexander, the phallus is like Faustian man. Is that the model that like is the phallus Faustian man? Is it like the essence of civilization striving for itself?
Like a huge dick fucking the vagina of infinite
space. It's the Thanos with the huge cock porn thing.